white gold in the pandemic. Hey, it's Mike Treat with Condition Orange Preparedness. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about the toilet paper shortages of 2020. So right before the National Declaration of Mercy was made by the President, and as well as only the states by the governors here in the United States, there was a run on, toilet paper of all things, as well as hand sanitizer, any face masks you could find in hardware stores, paint shops, and including anything sold online. So why was that? Many different reasons. We can speculate. We can say it was everybody being greedy and hoarding, and so on and so forth. It's really not that simple, but is a little bit more complicated than that. So I was doing some reading on some articles that were referenced to me, and then some that I found linked to the articles that were referenced to me. One of them that stood out was one sent to me, was actually posted on Facebook by our friend Claude Warner, and it was on markermedia.com. I'll post a link. And what was interesting is they talked about why there was actually a shortage. Now, it has nothing to do really entirely with people hoarding things, being scared of being without, this essential item. But what it comes down to is actually how the industry is set up as well. And so reading into this a little bit, there was a lot more complexity to it and some things I found out. So I'll cite a few points from the article, or the articles that I read, and then I'll cover those points, and we'll review some products here and some other options in the video. So we've been down this path before, apparently in the U.S. There was the Great Toilet Paper Scare of 1973. I was reading about in early 1973. There began to be a shortage of toilet paper in Japan. Now, the world didn't really take any notice of this at first. A Wisconsin Congressman, Harold Freilich, I believe I'm saying his name right, Harold Freilich, who represented an area that was heavily forested, which also produced a lot of paper pulp material, had started receiving complaints about paper pulp shortages. Then about a month later, I believe it was about November of 1973, early December, Congressman, he had discovered a document from the National Buying Center that had stated that there was a shortage of toilet paper for all the bureaucratic offices and for our troops. And you got to remember, this is nearing the end of the Vietnam War. This was really caught on to the public when Johnny Carson one night during his monologue had brought up that in the paper there was a lot of shortages going on. Because you also remember, this is when there was the OPEC oil crisis, fuel shortages, a lot of shortages in the 1970s. Johnny Carson, anyway, had brought up all these shortages and ended off with toilet paper. And it was kind of a punchline and a joke of his monologue. But it set off a fury that got everybody rushing, panicking, and buying toilet paper in the stores. And as I was reading about this, there were stores that were actually putting limits of like 2 rolls per customer per day. So for those of us who are used to buying in bulk, I've got like this huge pack right here. There's like 6 or 9 in that. So you can only imagine, this is back when there was like the 4-packs, or they were even singles. I remember, I was a kid, I was a little kid back then, but I do remember how these packs have turned into bulk. So you can imagine like 2 rolls per customer per day. And this is, of course, right before the Squeeze the Charmin ads were coming out. A little bit later, this all leveled out, and the toilet paper supply started building back up. But it was from about November of 1973 to early mid-February of 1974 when there was a shortage of the toilet paper. So anyway, this leveled out, and at one point Johnny Carson then even went on and owned what he said, and said, hey, he did a little damage control, did a little apology to the public. The point is that it shows you the power of the media to really get things really kicked off and really exacerbate people's fears and their anxieties. So, why are people hoarding toilet paper? First off, toilet paper is not exactly a PPE. It's not a piece of personal protective equipment. It doesn't do anything to keep us from contracting or any kind of disease or infection. It does help make life a little nice and clean as far as hygiene is concerned, but it's not a protective thing like a mask or it doesn't do anything like hand sanitizer, which are some of the things that people were rushing out to buy up, and rubber gloves, of course. But it's nothing like anything like that. So why would the demand be so high? Well, TP is a toilet paper. It's an essential item. Naturally, if you suddenly realize, we're going to be out of this stuff, I would probably get a little bit of panic would go on with. One of the articles, the key article that I read, had mentioned a few of the reasons and psychological reasons. So, like zero risk bias was a term that was brought up. People will want to eliminate or control one more risk in their life. So, if the risk is running out of a certain item, an essential item, if they can get enough of those to sustain them through the episode, depending on how long it is, then that's at least one less thing you got to worry about. Naturally, this could translate into finances or many, many other things. As far as like being prepared, we've seen this happen too. With every time there are proposed gun control laws, we see run on gun stores and ammunition. It has also happened during this pandemic. There was a run on guns and ammunition, amongst hand sanitizer and all the other things. One thing is that the United States Department of Homeland Security has a recommendation of keeping at least 2 weeks of food, medication, and other essentials on hand. Now, as Americans, we're a consumer-driven nation. We also take things to the extreme. We like big, we go excessive. And so that 2 weeks probably turns into 2 months or maybe even 2 years if you have that kind of income and storage. There was a lack of limits. Like in 1973, retailers didn't immediately place a limitation on all the paper products that people could buy. That, of course, allowed one customer to go in and buy up a bunch of stuff. And in this case, there were cases of I remember reading an article about two brothers who drove around these large trucks around the region of the country they lived in, and were just buying up all this stuff in the warehouse to jack up the prices. So, of course, the retailers were a little slow in responding to the placing the limits on the paper products, the good old toilet paper and the hand sanitizer and all the other things that people were buying. There was even online, there were price gouging schemes going on, and it took a little while for like Amazon and eBay to stop vendors who were selling these things at jacked up prices from selling on their, say, block film. One interesting thing was that because of this panic, there was a newspaper in Australia, NT News, I believe it would be Northern Territories News, but NT News, one of their Sunday papers, they had reserved 8 pages of their Sunday paper as blank, with basically the paper's watermark on it, and that was, okay, if there's a shortage on on toilet paper, people could use their 8 blank pages of the Sunday paper as a form of toilet paper. Now, wouldn't advise flushing toilet paper down your system. We'll get into that shortly. It's not recommended to be flushing newspaper down the toilet, but you could use it as a substitute. So the term brought up in the articles was anticipatory anxiety. Since initially there was little or conflicting information about the virus coming out, and even till this day, at the time of I'm making this video, there are still no straight or definitive answers. There's a lot of contradictory information about it. And then this is, of course, made worse by the media seeming to compete with our government officials about what the facts are about it and what we should do. The closest example that we have of a global pandemic in the nearest time was the 1918 influenza pandemic. And as we look at that historically, seeing drawing the parallel similarities and solutions, it can be kind of frightening because you do see some of the similarities, but at the same time, the solutions for our current modern world don't always line up with that. So that was another thing, is not having a very good frame of reference or an example of success from before. Also, I don't know how long a shelter-in-place order or the guidelines, would tell us how long to stay in. Avoiding unnecessary trips to the store. Well, if you can load up on, non-perishables, then you're good to go, right? This stuff you could store it for, decades. I can tell you, I remember a hotel that closed one time, and I remember buying in an auction some of the supplies. Amongst them was a big case of toilet paper. It turned out the stuff was like 30 years old. It worked just great. There was that's one thing you always buy in bulk, is the non-perishables. Another reason for the toilet paper shortage that was cited was herd mentality. Panic buying begets panic buying. Also, when we see store shelves empty of rather large items, so if you had, say, 10, 15, 50 cans of soup go off a shelf all of a sudden, well, that looks like that's just being pulled. In normal times, that looks like that's just something that's being pulled out, that's expired for a fresh stock to be rotated in, FIFO, FIFO, first in, first out, which is typically how the day-to-day supply is in a lot of the modern supermarkets. But suddenly, if you start seeing cases of toilet paper, and it's empty, and it's empty, and it's empty, and it's just suddenly regular, that gives you the sense of, hey, there's scarcity. Now, people being social creatures that we are, we take our cues from one another. And when we see empty shelves, especially big voids on these shelves, that suddenly gives you that sense of like, oh no, this is scarcity. And as soon as I can get that thing that's missing that everybody else is getting, I want it too. And that's how we, as the herd, gravitate our thoughts that way. This is also made worse by 24/7 news coverage, of course, but also social media. We're sharing our complaints and our woes about, hey, I'm out of toilet paper here, they're out of toilet paper there. Does anybody know where it's at? Now, that is the flip side of that coin, the social media coin, is that we have also been able to direct each other locally about where a source may be. I've seen plenty of examples of, hey, this Costco has this much right now, or a tip leading to the warehouse to the distribution center sends a truck out to the store on Saturday night, maybe Monday morning you can pick it up. That was an example. Now, that said, also the store is finally putting limits on how many of these items people could buy in a day. That did help, as well as we know there were the initial hours, 1 or 2 hours of stores are opening for the more at-risk population to go in to be able to buy things as well. One of the things that was brought up was anti-price gouging laws. During states of emergency, governments, usually at a state level, have laws in place that restrict the raising of price on essential items, be it gasoline, medication, food, whatever it is. But because the laws are a little slow to catch up with technology, this wasn't the case for being enforced for things online. Like I mentioned earlier, there were the online sellers who were gouging up the prices, and then the vendors who were shutting them down. Here in Minnesota, our governor actually had pointed out during a press conference a case he had heard about of somebody charging $1 per squirt of hand sanitizer, and how the Attorney General's office was going to be looking into any price gouging that had happened. We'd be investigating those complaints. I don't know where that went or where it's going. I can tell you that it will take a long time to hold anybody accountable for those things. There was one argument in another article I'd read that because of anti-price gouging laws, and I don't agree with this argument, but the argument was made that if vendors, if businesses, retailers were allowed to raise the prices, that would have cut down on the hoarding and the panic buying and the mass buying. Because if, for example, if toilet paper prices were raised 5 times of what they normally are, that would slow down anybody wishing to buy, say, 5 or 10 packs, and you go buy 1 pack of it. I think that's actually a rather stupid argument, because those who have the money to do that will just do it, and then they'll just raise the price up anyway. So that doesn't really stop anything with hoarding. Just my opinion on that. So hoarding isn't really the problem, it's the toilet paper industry, the way it's set up, also the distribution and supply chain. According to the Strategic Resource Group, store shelves had shown a deep deficiency of toilet paper on store shelves in the first 50 days. So we're talking like about 6 weeks into this, I believe we're at maybe getting on to 7. Prior to the national emergency and the shelter-in-place orders being given out nationally and by the states, we were always seeing this happen in the early weeks of March. The run on toilet paper and other essentials in those stores. The inventories have begun to get back up in the last couple weeks of April 2020. In fact, I was just into a store today where I saw the store shelves are pretty full. Now, these weren't you didn't see like the Charms and Cottonelles, the really nice stuff, but you saw the store brand versions or whatever the stores could get. The production has ramped up a lot more. I've read that there was about another 1.5 million rolls per day being produced in the factories. The other thing is that because of all this stuff being bought, there's always the thing of buyer's remorse. So stores like Costco, for example, have included toilet paper and bags of rice and many other things amongst items that will not be accepted for returns. So if you were one of those people who bought a bunch of this stuff, hey, don't feel bad you can't take it back. Guess what? You have a non-perishable item that you'll be able to sit on for years. Hey, you've got a head on one prep. Good for you. I also suspect there'll probably be some really large presents under people's trees this year with all the toilet paper people are sitting on. So the toilet paper industry, the products of the toilet paper industry are divided up into 2 categories. There's commercial, which is this stuff right here. Okay. Yeah, there's commercial, and then there's consumer. Commercial is this nice, itchy, scratchy, thin, single-plied stuff. It's made from a different material than the consumer grade stuff right here. The industry is set up for the majority of the toilet paper products produced are commercial. Georgia Pacific is a major producer of commercial toilet paper. This wonderful scratchy stuff that goes on a big dispenser, like you see at the office or a public restroom or something like that. The softer, cushier stuff that we all know and love and depend on and that we're hoarding these days, this is made from a whole different fiber than this stuff, so you have your 4-ply and the like. So Georgia Pacific, they produce these big rolls as well as the smaller individual wrapped ones that come in big cases. And those individual wrapped ones are like what you'd find in the janitor's supply closet at work. Whenever you go into a place and you tell the barista or whomever is working, the manager, hey, bathroom attendant, can they go change the toilet paper? That's what they're going to get, or the smaller rolls. Of course, pretty much nobody at home has a dispenser for one of these big old things here. And I'll tell you about where I actually got this a little later. No, I did not steal it. I actually bought it. Okay. It was estimated that most people make the majority of their restroom trips outside the home. So it's usually when you're in public, you're at work or school or wherever you are when you're not at home. With approximately 75% of the population under a shelter-in-place order, well, suddenly we're going from using this stuff to more of this stuff. And 24/7 usage of your home restroom means that now it's estimated that this is up 40% in usage compared to this Restaurant Supply. And by the way, that's where I got this stuff from, Restaurant Supply. Some restaurants, because restaurants, coffee shops, and places like that sell to the public, other goods, some of them were selling some of their basics, which they call this, or they were just throwing in a roll of toilet paper whenever you came and picked up, say $10 or $20 worth of takeout. I've heard it was nice because they don't have that overhead anymore, and at least they could sell it off or help out people during the shortage. Just as a side note, I got this commercial size of toilet paper, this big roll, at a Restaurant Supply company. And I got it so that I would at least have a supply of it on hand for any classes I might be teaching this spring and summer, which all the ranges were closed in my state, so those classes were shut down, and we know about where we're at with that right now. But what was interesting was A roll of this right now you can buy on Amazon for about $20 if you find it, maybe even more. I paid about $42 for a case of, had 6 of these rolls in it. So now I've got, toilet paper for classes or even as a backup supply. Don't have the dispenser for it. But when I ordered it online, and I went to pick it up at the local restaurant supply company, and I kind of got interrogated about, hey, where's your restaurant? And, where's your restaurant? And I explained to them what I bought it for. It's for a business purpose. What didn't really matter what I was buying it for. That's really my business. But they had said, well, we're having a lot of people who are coming in and buying this for their houses. So that was their apprehension about, I guess, selling it to me. And so I get the third degree there. I understand it, but at the same time, I'd said, well, in a few days, and this is just a little inside information I had with my own state, but I knew that restaurants were going to be closed for just takeout. To dining rooms are going to be closed in 1 or 2 days anyway. The handwriting was on the wall. And sure enough, 2 days later, it wouldn't have mattered if they couldn't have sold this to restaurants anymore, if restaurants would have been out of supply. But selling this to the public 2 days later was certainly a solution from when we were short on the consumer grade stuff. All right, so let's talk a little bit about consumer toilet paper, the stuff that we all use at home. It's made from a different fiber, totally different manufacturing process to it, from my understanding. As I said, the commercial stuff is single ply, whereas we have multiple ply with this stuff. Procter & Gamble, they dominate the market, making the commercial stuff right here. So the average U.S. household, it was estimated that, which they used a number of 2.6 people per household. And it was estimated that each household uses about 409 rolls of toilet paper per year. I'm sure there's some variances on that, but that was kind of the average numbers they had. Right now, as of 2020, the demand for consumer toilet paper, they said, is up 73% from pre-COVID-19 pandemic levels. And it's up 40% for the demand for consumer toilet paper is up 40% as well. Some might be saying, well, why can't they just take this commercial stuff and just ship it out to the local stores? One of the reasons why, it is certainly distribution supply chain. The thing is that if the commercial, and the other thing was to retool or re-outfit the commercial production to do the consumer production. By the time that would actually be done, could be done and online, and the commercial producers are now producing consumer product, the math they were looking at is like, okay, things will be, the curve will be flat, and we're probably going to be open back up and operating business as normal going forward. So by the time that would happen, it wouldn't be very cost effective, and then they would have to go right back to needing commercial grade toilet paper for going back to the institutions, work, public restrooms, all that. Now, I think we could argue, though, we would rather have the nice, good, the more spendy consumer toilet paper, this soft stuff, right, for the bum, than this old scratchy sandpaper stuff right here. But so that's why they decided that they didn't switch over, going from commercial to consumer. So in the early weeks of the shortages, people began to seek out substitutes, and that's where all this wonderful stuff you see in front of me is. The problem is that the modern sewage system, or toilet system and sewage system that we mostly have here in the Western world, at least in the U.S. and Europe, is that it's only made to to flush away toilet paper, actual toilet paper, flushable product that breaks up in the septic or sewer system, and of course human bodily waste products. All of the things do not flush down the toilet, and if you do get them down the toilet system into the sewer system, they tend to build up and pile up, and it gets really to be a problem. That is where we break it down. I'm breaking this down a couple categories here for the solutions people come up with. So the flushable substitutes are fewer. Toilet paper is obviously them. Now, one other thing that was brought up in an article I read was those toilet seat covers. You see those sometimes. I see them in truck stops when I'm traveling around the country. I've seen them in other places. They're not as common, but they are out there. But those could be used as a form of toilet paper. Now, that said, if those break up so easily in the in the toilet, or you can flush them, then that tells me they don't really give you much of a barrier between the nasty toilet seat, the public place, and your bottom side, okay? But the other problem is these flushable wipes, or so-called flushable wipes. Flush them one at a time. You probably don't even want to flush one at all. These are great if you're out in the field or in an emergency, but you're not running them down a toilet, where they'll build up in a sewer system. But as we've known for almost 20 years, since these hit the market and became commonplace, these have caused a lot of problems in municipal sewer systems where they're like backing up, and you can find plenty of pictures on the internet of how that's been a problem. I know, I think it was in San Francisco, maybe in London, and a few other major cities around the Western world where they've had these mountains of this stuff just building up. Really bad stuff. So some of the other substitutes, I'm sure some of you have bought these. Some of you may be thinking about buying these on Amazon and several websites that suddenly just popped up like weeds, as well as all the social media ads like on Facebook. You'll see stores that have popped up overnight and they're selling hand sanitizer and toilet paper. And they're selling these 10-pack rolls for 30 and 40 and 50 bucks, and you want to get them. And yes, I can get a big old case. It's 4 or 5 times what I would have paid, but damn it, I want it. And you get them 4 to 6 weeks later. And you're expecting one of these. And what you actually get are these little tiny rolls right here. This is what we're used to, and this is what the ads on Amazon or wherever that you're buying these make it look like. These rolls are these rolls. These rolls are not these rolls. Now they actually look soft and they don't look scratchy like this commercial stuff here. But I wouldn't pay 40 bucks for these. I paid $7.99 for these, and yes, that's a lot more than I think they're really worth. But I bought one of these, and you know what? These will actually go in some get-home bags, and these will go into some travel boxes I keep, totes and stuff like that. So they're just nice because they're little individual, size ones you can use, so that you don't have to carry around this big one. For maybe 2 or 3 days, single person has one of these, 2 of them, however much you need. They're really great for that. But buyer beware, okay, again, these may look like these, but if you buy them, this is what you're going to get, okay? I think they actually look like cash register tape. Yeah, I guess cash register tape would also be an option as well, but again, it's not flushable. See the bit about the newspaper. All right, so the other half of this, the unflushable solutions, all this stuff I have over here. These can be used as a toilet paper substitute, but you don't want to be flushing them down your toilet into the sewer system or your septic system, okay? You probably could use these in a Biffy, but I can't say that they break down too fast or too well. So obviously we have the flushable wipes. Flushable, debatable. Baby wipes. A lot of folks I know who have been in the military, who have been in the field, they really love these. I can say the same from me with camping and hiking and boondocking. Yeah, these are great because they're multi-purpose, but you want to make sure that they break down and you don't be leaving piles of this behind. Be a good camper, right? Another thing that was brought up is facial tissues, like your Kleenexes and Puffs, even the ones with lotion, I suppose. Yeah, you could use these. They're sort of single ply, but again, you don't want to be flushing these. And you think, well, yeah, they'll flush down, they get wet, and they seem like when they're wet, they're like the, this wadded up toilet paper here. It looks the same, but they really are different fibers and they're made differently. The other one that are these napkins, and I got to tell you, it was a little depressing seeing folks who were desperate enough they were buying these, and yeah, they look like perfect squares to take care of business with, but these also don't go down the toilet. Now, in the field in a pinch or in a trash can, you can dispose of them like that. But again, they're in emergency, they're a good substitute, but do not flush these. Of course, there were tons and tons of paper towels. And then there weren't. And this is when things got really interesting, because I had talked to a plumber that I know, and he said, yeah, within like 2 weeks of the toilet paper running short, their calls were just up to go out and clear out sewer systems. And they were backed up with all these baby wipes and things like that. But they would find these giant squares that were just blocking up toilets and backing up sewer lines and septic lines. And then, of course, there are these nice, tough shop towels. Now, I can tell you, I like these for, using around the shop or the studio. I keep, one in my vehicle for any kind of work I have to do. These are great for working, for cleaning up grease and all that. I don't think they're great. They're not comfortable for toilet paper. Of course, I've never used them. I can just tell by the texture here. But definitely not something that anybody wants to be flushing down their modern toilet system. So, some solutions. Okay, well, obviously having enough toilet paper on hand, sure, you can sit on piles and piles of this stuff. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are right now. One of the things is I would suggest is you inventory how much you use in your home by however many household members you have. Figure out how much you use in a week, how many rolls, how many packs, and then go by that number and decide, okay, maybe having enough for at least 6 weeks. It seems that the supply, on the run on the supply, seemed to be going about 6 to maybe 7 weeks. I first noticed like the shortages around February 29th of the year. And we are nearing about April 30th, so maybe 7-8 weeks. If you have that amount on hand to make it for whatever there's a shortage, so if you have enough there. Nice thing is that buying in bulk, you'll save some money, and it saves you quite a few trips to the store, as we talked about earlier. One less thing to worry about. Remember, zero risk bias, right? I would suggest maybe building up a 3-month reserve, and that would go for everything else as well. You could even go further. Now, this might not be a viable option for everybody. You might be living in a 200 square foot studio apartment. And, real estate is at a premium. And, well, who wants to be sitting on furniture made out of rolls of toilet paper and, well, probably paper towels. But, maybe functional, right? But not really fashionable. But at least you would have a supply. The other suggestion we make is figure out what your number is and then just use that and replenish that just before it goes out. You don't want to tap into your 3-month reserve. You have that. Remember, it's a non-perishable item. Wherever you can store it would be great. If you can't store it on site, one other suggestion I had gotten from a friend was they use a commercial storage locker, and they just keep a supply of this stuff. And they actually had to go into that supply that they had in this commercial storage locker. They share it and put all their preps in it. It's a network of people that I heard from who do that. So that's one suggestion you could do as well. Everybody chips in on that. You figure out what works for you, but I would suggest at least having enough to get you through about 6 weeks, maybe even 3 months. And that's for everything, not just toilet paper. Okay, so the other thing is because of that, you'll have to get a little creative with your storage methods. Now, in doing that, you'll probably find other ways to store other things as well. The other thing is financially, you probably want to see what you can buy in bulk. Now, I can tell you, $20 for a roll of this versus $42 for this. Now, this isn't the greatest stuff, but just to test it out, I have this is the second roll. I pulled this out of a pack. I pulled one roll out, and I just wanted to see how long this might last. Believe it or not, actually, a family of 3 got about that many weeks, about 3 weeks worth out of one of those rolls. So that's something to think about. So you get 6 of these in a case. If you have a family of 3, that's a few months actually there. So this might be an option. It's a little less expensive. It's about as much as these big ones, but the big ones will last about as long and they'll be more luxurious. So you'll have to look at that. Plus, you can order these online, or you can get them at the local restaurant supply shop like I did. But you figure out what your options are. It's also nice not having to change the roll too often. That right there, if you have the dispenser, I think was like $20 for the dispenser. Then you have that to go. And if you own a business, then you can shop for your business and your house. Yay, double win there. Okay, but look at like your warehouse membership stores like Sam's Club, Costco for your discounts, and try to buy these things in bulk to save a little bit of money. Longer term solutions, I know people are looking at composting toilets. I've talked to a lot of people about that. There are some issues with that. One is your local zoning ordinances, your building codes and ordinances might not allow for it. The other thing is retrofitting homes. Modern homes are built to take modern flush toilets. This is something in an article I read about in London, how several years back people wanted to replace the old Victorian flush toilets, water flush toilets, with composting toilets. Those also have some other issues as well. I only know I have limited experience with composting toilets, mostly from staying in cabins and the like. But I think that people will certainly start looking at those going forward after this as an option. The other is bidets. I don't know much about bidets, but I have friends who work in the hardware business, and they say that they have sold a lot of these, and they're an aftermarket product you can install on your toilet. Another thing, and we'll look into this too, is I've heard about is the hand bidet. And basically, it's just using a Hudson sprayer like you would put together. You can get one of these for $8 or $9 at your local hardware store. All right, so there you have it. There's a little bit about the toilet paper shortage, crisis, and hoarding.